Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So I think we are good to go. It's already 4 o'clock, and I think we can start. As I've already mentioned, there are there are a few participants who have already joined in, and few more will join in, like maybe in couple of minutes or so. But I think we should get started because this is such an important topic. So many things to cover in this session. Uh, so. Uh, so, hello everyone, and I'm Dr. Pranita from Sai IIT Bombay. Uh, as most of you know that SINE, that stands for Society for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, it's a technology business incubator hosted by IIT Bombay, and it's open for everyone, whoever has a technology which can create intellectual property, social impact, strategic value, can create any sort of impact. They can come to us with their ideas, and we can provide start to scale support. Support in the forms of various grants, investments, mentor, connect, network, as well as expertise. All that sort of supports is available at Science, and you can work on your ideas with that and take your idea, convert it into a POC product, and take it to the market. So that sort of a support is available at Sign. I will not go in detail about the sign because this session is more about, something about how business, market survey or the market research will help you in developing your POC product or take your product to the market, sustain in the market, make a good business. So it's all about that. Today we are going to so today I welcome you all on behalf of Sign for this particular session. We have eminent and expert speakers from industry, as well as very experienced moderator for this session, who will drive this session in a way that you will get a lot of insights into this particular topic, because most of the and why we have chose this topic is that most of the time when we are interacting with the startups or early innovators, or early stage startups, they have a lot of questions about this particular segment, that is market survey. How important it is, when should we do it, what is the right time to do it, how much funds has to be apportioned to it, and what exactly, I mean, how significant role this play in POC development or product development, and even after getting your product to the market. So all these important questions, or the answers to these questions, will be provided by our experts today in this session. I will briefly introduce you to our today's moderator for the session, who is, as I've already mentioned, he has a vast experience in the industry. He's currently business mentor in residence at Sign. He's interacting with various startups, grantees from various programs, early stage innovators, and he keeps on sharing his experience with them, help them to take their product to POC, to the market. So let me introduce you to the today's speaker, that is Mr. Parthasarathi Ponguri. He was from Sanofi, and currently, as I've mentioned, he's associated with Sign as a business mentor. He's a sales and marketing professional with almost 40 years of experience in pharmaceutical industry. His expertise in the space of cardiology and diabetes. He is also a recipient of a prestigious OP Award of Marketing Excellence. And since a couple of years, he has been mentoring the medtech startups in diagnostic at Science, and he mentors various startups operating in domains like genomics, AI, physical disability, etc. Some of the startups have either successfully commercialized their innovation or about to enter the market. And thanks to all the guidance and the significant contribution coming from Partha in guiding them how to go about the markets research, developing the product, POC. So all this is experience which helps them, these startups, to get their product to the market. So today we have such experienced moderator who is going to drive this session. So with this brief introduction, I hand over this session to Partha. Partha, over to you.
Thank you, Pranita. Today I have pleasure in introducing to you two of the finest, some close association projects with them. In fact, one of the speaker was in my brand team and I was the marketing head. So first, let me start. She is currently the associate director, customer insights and new product planning. If you want to plan your career, then you should be planning the planned. That's to reach the her journey started in and he was handling both local as well as key global brands. After she had enough to do with marketing, she moved into business development where she was responsible for new product planning.
Partha, if I may interrupt, we are not able to
and
hear you
from there
clearly.
she had a
switch off your video, Partha. Maybe you will get the bandwidth.
So much Paramita Bhattacharya. Speaker is head of support program. Those into insight. MS Health, Premium Health, it is known as a mood. Diabetes program called Saath Saath. Rajita manages almost about 100,000 patients of diabetes who are on. Her expertise will help us not only to understand better the customer, but also the consumer. And before I give the floor to these two speakers, I just want to give a brief introduction about today's program. The startups who are here, they are at various stages in their journey, startup journey. Some are new, some have developed a minimum viable product and working on it. Some are ready to go to the market. Your requirements are different, and we will try and address those requirements during the presentation and also during the question and answer session. For the guy who is ready to go to the market, the initial few slides may seem repetitive, but please bear with us. This is only to have a common understanding of the concepts which we are going to discuss. And we will be running the session for about 45-50 minutes, and later we will throw open the session for question and answers. So in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can type in key in the questions in the chat box. Also, prior to the program, we have received some questions from some of the startups. We will take some of those things. Even after this, if still you have some doubts, you can always reach out to me or Pranita for further clarification. With this, now I leave the floor to both Paramita as well as Rajita. Over to you, Paramita.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Partha, for the introduction. Although I think, like many others, it was not very clear. But I'll still say, hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I've spent about 2 days.
Paramita, you are not audible.
Hello? Am I audible? Rajita?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are audible. Paramita,
okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Partha. So just to, I think your voice was breaking a little bit. So I currently head the customer insights and the new product planning at Sanofi India. I have with me about 2 decades of experience from sales to marketing to new product development, working a little bit in business development and merger and acquisition. So that's been my journey. And currently I'm heading the CI and the new product planning. So I just want to say that, much of the journey has been intuitive and a little serendipitous. But now when I look back, if I had done a proper research understanding, would I have a better outcome? Maybe, may not be, but for sure, I'm sure it would have been much more efficient. So that's it. But I think I'll start off with how does market research relate to probably the journey that all of you are going through, and all of you are at different phases of the journey. Rajita, the next slide, if you can.
Yes.
Yeah. So in today's session, basically, we would talk about that how market research is relevant at every juncture of the innovation journey that all of us are in. What is it that we should address at an ideation? What is it that we should wait till prototyping? And what we should never touch till the time I'm ready to scale up, because at the end of the day, market research is perceived to be quite expensive. So I think that's what we would try to dissect and figure out a more optimized way of approaching it. Secondly, maybe understand a little bit the importance of data versus intuitive types of researches, which Rajita shall take you over. And then post-ideation, after the product is launched, how the whole MR landscape flows around, we will be able to take it up. I would share a little bit of an experiences that, especially in the last 1 year when pandemic was around there, how are the ways we did a little bit of researching, relying a little on the agile research, because last 1 year was definitely unprecedented. So these are the top topics that we shall touch upon, and then we'll move it as it moves. So coming to the process of design thinking, I think all of you are essentially following it and at different stages. So this is, I think, what you do follow, and at every stage, getting the insight is key before we can move into the next level. So the whole process, definitely it starts from empathize to define to ideate to prototype and testing. But the point is that, do we do market research? Yes, we do. Even when the idea strikes, it always starts with empathize. So it is what in the market research parlance, it's called ethnography. The whole idea comes, the aha moment is when we notice or we figure out that, yes, this can potentially become my idea. So that's where it starts. And therefore, we start observing, we start shadowing, and it's non-judgmental at this point in time. So market research is critical and is pertinent at every stage. There are a lot of questions. So it's important to filter down which question to ask at which stage, and therefore what are the research and what could be the methodology that could help us to fund the answers to the questions that we have. So essentially, this is what we do it. And when we bring in the hat of research, it's more about being aware. I think all of us have been doing a little bit of homework right from the time we are kids. Market research is nothing. It's the kind of homework that we need to do at every stage as we move upon. So next slide, Rajita, over to you in explaining the process and what it is.
So I will now take you through what is market research, and in a very simple term, it is nothing but a process of collecting, analyzing, interpreting the data about our target market, be it consumer, competitors, and the industry as a whole. Now, what, like Paramita said, in our regular day-to-day thing also, whatever we decide, most of it is intuitive. So intuitive is also a research. But if you have to see what is the difference between an intuitive thinking versus a data-driven or a structured thinking, intuitive relies more on gut feeling. Whereas if you are constructing and thinking through the process of what is the objective, what is the outcome they're expecting, and if you're following a structured process for it, it is more based on facts. Intuitive is how best you can guess. It can backfire, it could work, it cannot work, and it is more of a corrective nature. Whereas a data-driven decision making is more choices are tested. It is less risk averse. You can take calculated bets because it is backing up by robust insights, and it is more directive in nature, whereas an intuitive decision making can be sometimes very risky. You go ahead, and then again maybe there are times when you cannot take back. So if we have to learn about research, it is simply the process of how you gather insights, as simply as that, and that process has a structure and a design, so which follows with following 6 steps. What is the objective and what is the problem that we are finding solution for? Because this is important to understand where is the need gap lying. That will determine what kind of a design is deployed to gather the data and collect inputs. Then to gather and collect that inputs, there are different instruments, we call it in research, which are techniques, and I will take it in a while. Having gathered the content, how would you analyze it, and what is the ideal sampling that is important to be able to gather them? Would you take it from 2 people and make a conclusion, or would you go to 400 people and make a conclusion? And both of this has got timeline and cost implications, and where which one fits is important to understand. Then you would analyze the data and obviously visualize and communicate the results. But mind you well, we are starting with the end in mind. What is it that we want in the end? That determines what is the construct of the interim process. Having seen these steps, I will now briefly dwell upon basic framework of how the research types work. One is a primary research and one type is called the secondary research. What is secondary research? Something which is already available in general domain, which is done and available. So for example, you see a lot of research articles coming in even Times of India that they did a research and the statistics say this, and you do census of India and this is how the population is. So you and I, we want that information. It is readily available. We don't have to engage money, deploy and get that information. So it is something that someone else has done. Primary research is something that you are looking for questions. Maybe you have an idea, you have a concept, and you want to know what about that concept is the most liked feature by the consumer. Now, this will not be available in the general domain, and you will have to speak to consumer, find out, show the concept, and elicit those responses and get your understanding. So that type is called primary research. The examples I would say, like I said, focused group interview, observational studies with a particular objective about your concept, your product, to get more understanding of your required market, because that data is not available in general domain. Now, qualitative, quantitative, both these techniques can have 2 ways how data could be gathered, and which is in the second half I will explain qualitative, quantitative difference. But so even in secondary data, you can have a qualitative data information available and a quantitative, and say is the case with PMR. What are the key benefits? Primary research is specific to your needs and you control the quality of the insight or the data or the information coming in. Secondary data is generally very cheap because it is available. You are not spending more money. It is available free in domain. However, it could be vast and you will have to pick and choose what you information, and maybe there are areas and customizations that you want. They may not be available because it is engaged for a different purpose. But having being available, we can borrow some insight from it. Disadvantage, primary research, yes, because it is your own initiative engaged, could take cost and time. And Paramita in later section will deal with you. How can you minimize this cost and time? Since from a startup angle, that's also something that we have to keep in mind. Unlike for us, when I operated as a researcher or a CMI professional from an organization, the organization has those budgets to invest to be able to make marketing and business decision making. Secondary research is data can be too old. So relevance of whatever is available in general domain is also important when you keep that in mind, and that could be a disadvantage at that. In terms of qualitative and quantitative, this is very, very interesting to know, because when I say I want to know why a particular thing is happening, if I am a physician, then what are the factors that are important for me before I decide to pick a solution? Is cost important? Is efficacy important? Is safety more important? Or is innovation or novelty more important? So these factors I will know only when I speak to physicians one-on-one, and a general physician could have a different perspective versus a specialist. He could have a different perspective. So that framework seek to develop and confirm your hypothesis about a particular phenomena, that you will have to do through qualitative research. And if you want to quantify how big is the scale of interest, that's something that comes in the quantitative domain. So data type in a qualitative, it's more verbose, it is more picture driven. You elicit response from many people and gather insights, and after you analyzing the qualitative data. Whereas quantitative is more coming out of a structured questionnaire, and you can analyze in numerical form, saying 90% of the customers preferred attribute A and rate it at high level of satisfaction. Context and relevance, if you have to see, results in a qualitative research are very contextual, culture specific, time, place bound. You cannot do an in-depth interview of somebody who is in a very remote town and generalize it to pan India. You will have to understand his perspective in that context, because he may be a small town, he may be a resident of a mini metro in an area where people profile are not so educated, and his context of understanding the treatment could be very different from somebody who's in a metro in a high corporate hospital. Whereas in terms of quantitative, the results could be more generalized because they are much more done on a very vast sample size, and they are more predictable even if you have to repeat it. Effect on external environment, again, qualitative research is more to do with natural setting, like we said earlier, ethnographic study where it's more observational study, or you visit the person in his own premises, try and understand. So if you have to relate it to your own research journey, if you have developed an idea, you will toss the idea with the potential user, get the insights, whether it is making sense, are there improvements. So it's in a very naturalistic surrounding, whereas quantitative is very predictable, because you have the whys that you have got and the attributes that you have got in qualitative are sacrosanct. You have a laundry list. Quantitative, you are very sure these are the attributes, I have not left out anything, and now I want to quantify and prioritize which is important, how much people will like a particular thing, so that I can do my volume estimations, or I can understand the bigger market picture. Key result instrument, this is very critical. So for a qualitative thing, the researcher who is interviewing, he's understanding and he's using techniques of probing, more of why do you think this could be happening? If somebody says no, I don't like that, then the next question should be, what exactly you don't like, or can you tell us more, can you tell us more, and get the underlying reasons behind it. That is why the researcher himself is very key, and it is more open-ended. So usually these interviews or understandings are recorded, transcribed, and then the transcripts are underlined to see common themes coming out, to pick out, and the insight could be varied. So it helps you get a laundry list of things that come in the domain, and you are not missing out anything. After that, doing a deep dive on those laundry lists to see perception of competitor, your brand perception, or quantifying which is important, prioritization, that all can be done in the quantitative part, because that is done through a instrument or a closed-ended questionnaire, where the output that comes from quantitative acts in as a feeder for response, yes, no, or if you ask a question, which is the top 3 attributes you prefer. So the attributes which go in designing a quantitative questionnaire come from a qualitative research. Analytical objectives, again, one is to describe the variation, how varied can the responses be, and the second one is how would you quantify the variation. Sampling design, again very critical. Focus on the qualitative part is to capture variety of respondents, and the impact is not so much on size. So suppose you want insights from male, female of an age group of 25, somebody from 50 plus, somebody from metro, non-metro. You can have cohorts of a blend of these. Numbers are not important, but elicit responses from them, and maybe capture these 3 things a metro guy said, these 3 things non-metro guy said, and you have a laundry list. Okay, now these attributes are encompassing of holistically the entire population. When you do a quantitative, however, you want to really use those things. Really, is this more important if you take a geographical cut across the country, across genders? Then you need a wider sample size. There, the focus is on choosing a sample size and exact cut and slice of the sample, so that your insights are more predictable and usable, and the data is that much more powerful. Now, again, we have seen this in the 6 steps. One of the step was sample design, just dwelling a little bit more on these key aspects, though I have shared it in the earlier example. So key question most of the times would be, how good is a sample, or how good is any sample and what is an optimal sample. So generally for a statistical significance, what is said is we have a strong level of confidence when the margin of error uh, uh, is as low as say 5% and 95% confidence level. What it means is if I am doing a research on a sample of 300 size, whatever the spec, maybe 50% male, 50% female, maybe 50% metro, non-metro, whatever cuts and slice you want. At the end of it, the result that I get, there is a 5% error margin. And suppose I have to re-repeat this entire exercise on another 300 set of similar specification, not the same respondent, but completely different set of responses, there is 95% chance that you will get the same results. That is what it means by saying the error margin. And now you see the table on the left hand side. So if you do an interview size of 30, there is an error margin of 20%. But when you're doing a qualitative research, you're not actually quantifying. So there we are looking at maximum variation capture. So there we want as many varied perspectives to come on board so that we have a laundry list captured, which helps us define, okay, these are the buckets in which I analyze. There 20% error margin is okay. But when you want to do a volume estimation, and if you do a 20% error margin, it will have an impact on your P&L or your business decision. There you need to validate your decision by at least a minimum 300 to 400 sample, because a 5% error margin is not so much risky and it's a balanced decision. So that's the aspect on the sampling research. When it comes to instrument design, I have already shared a couple of, and I'll just reinforce. If in a qualitative survey, one, the researcher or you in your case, when you're talking, are very important because you are capturing as much meat and understanding of a particular thing. So staying curious, probing, and getting as much possible from varied aspects is something that is done through surveys and questionnaires, phone interview, but more open-ended, the why kind of questions. Whereas, sorry, that's the quantitative. So focus group, in-depth and observational. So observation is you be in a setup, and most of the consumer research are done observational to observe what is the typical day of a teenager or a millennial, where does he eat, where does he drink, what he prefers, what's his style. Because if you have to design and advertise which needs to be appealed to them, then the researcher or the marketer needs to know these insights. Focus group is somewhere where you are bringing in 3-4 people of varied groups together, because there are some topics, if you have to talk of say vaginal hygiene, and if somebody goes and asks personal questions, it could be intimidating. One person may not open up. But if you are holding a group setting of say 5-6 women together, and there is a women researcher and she's asking queries, then in a group people find it comfortable sharing their insights, and if one opens up, it elicits somebody else to share their perspective, and you can gather more meat. And then depth interviews are one-on-one. So these techniques, which one to use, is decided basis what is the objective that I have defined in my research, at which stage I am and what am I looking for. If my problem is defined, then I know, okay, to get more and more of this, the best would be to do a focus group. Or if it is a very general topic, okay, in an in-depth interview also I can get this. So that is the aspect of instrument designing when it comes to qual and quant. Secondary research is another aspect. We said it is freely available in research domain, and there are websites of all market research agencies where there are a lot of white papers published. When you have to look at socioeconomic class classification, I think IMRB has got a SCCA classification understanding, which is available in free domain. If you are looking at a particular therapy area of diabetes, then you can have ADA, IDF websites which you can register and get a lot of prevalence. What are the cuts and diseases? Is diabetes more prevalent in Asian belt as compared to other? All those informations are readily available. So when you have to do your construct of how is your market, what is the most widest funnel, we call it in MR, and I think the terminology that you're using is total accessible market and total operational market. There you can use a lot of market secondary research which is available in that particular therapy or healthcare domain that your solution is in. Again, educational institutes also have a lot of understanding. One quick example on each of these to give the application and the outcome for you to visualize how the outcome would look like. So suppose there is a vaccine product and I want to understand how mothers think about vaccinating the children, and which are various profiles of mother, because some are very proactive, some may not be so proactive, they need little more awareness. And what are their decisions, how do they go about choosing, do they proactively go, or they dependent on their husband? And to understand those dynamics, you generally engage into a qualitative research to identify, in a big set of women mothers as a population, are there different segments or buckets of consumers who behave in a particular fashion. What it helps me to do is to help me target my solution and communication about my product very well, so that I position it well for a buying in and a pickup. And this, I mean, very lay example is like, you have seen Cadbury's get so many variations. Silk is targeted to a particular profile, somebody is very economic, it's a different advertising, so more aspirational, more trial oriented. If I stick to this particular example, this is an example of segmentation, and used observational or ethnographic or focus group interviews. The understanding or the inputs captured through a qualitative research were, again, if you have to look at the lens, segmentation can be done through either geography or through demographic, through profiles of age, young mothers, seasoned mothers, or through attitudes, what are their interests, is she a homemaker, is she a working mother, is she a very focused, what do you say, tiger mom type of a thing, who's like opinionated, behavioral again, and need-based segmentation. And the outcome here helped us show that we were able to identify in that particular research, there's a very joyful mom who is very happy-go-lucky. She's not really so aware. So she's not the one who's proactively going and hunting for vaccination, versus somebody who's a super prepared mom. So every stage in her life, she's more and more alert about the next step of development of her child. She reads ahead, she gets understanding, and she leads that decision in that. And that way you can have 4 different types of approach. This was the outcome of the research.
So if I can just add on, just because the story is getting very interesting. The whole idea for this study is, we have a vaccine and it is an optional vaccine. It is not a compulsory vaccine that has to be given. Now, if it is an optional vaccine, how does the mother look at it? So therefore we thought, okay, let's have, segment the mothers. So we find there's a classical one. Whatever that mother's mother had done, she'll do it. She'll not go venture out. Then the super moms which Rajita is talking about, she just wants that my child should not miss school even one day. He has to be best in mental math, he has to be a scholar, he has to be the best skater. So no school missing. So how do they look at it? So therefore there is another man who's very happy-go-lucky. It could be a second child, the child will grow up any which way, vaccinate or do not vaccinate. Now, and then similarly you segment. Then at the end of the day, however big environment we are in, ultimately the resource is always limited. Therefore, if I only have, say, ₹10, in which segment should I go and contribute? This does not tell that, because ultimately it is minimum investment. Which one gives me the maximum return of investment? So if this is my problem statement, I have got what next? This is incomplete, So what can complete? Where should I put my money in? Is probably the other research technique which Rajita will take on. Yeah, Rajita.
Thank you, Paramita, very aptly said. And now we move on to the quantitative aspect. So this is a different research taken, but I can draw analogies from the qualitative earlier example here as well. So quantitative is, now if you have to just take the earlier example, and if I want to know which is my priority segment, because like Paramita said, I have a limited resource and I want to put my bet on the best potential one so that I get maximum outcome, then I need to know which of this is a bigger size and where, or where I can, or where my product fits well and I will get a good pickup. That's where you will engage a 300 to 400 sample size, taking cuts of all these types of profiles of mothers, because by then what are the segment anchors, like how to identify this type. So you'll define, I'll have a design where I will pick up, and I will put screeners in this questionnaire, which helps me identify, okay, at least I have 50% of cautious mom versus say 25% of, or maybe 25% of each of these moms on board, a collective sample of 400. I have a structured design capturing what all aspects I want. So these are the attributes important to you. How would you rate it? How often, what's your frequency of doctor visit? What all activities you engage your children in? And then map that. And if you have to now see the output here, so this particular output is of a HCP segment where it's a diabetes category, and there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 segments identified through previous qualitative research. What we wanted to understand are therapy preferences different from each of these. And if I have maybe a DPP for a sulfonylurea portfolio, and I have limited resource, where should I go? Which segment should be my priority segment? Now here from the chart itself, it will be very clear that while segment 1, if you see the size of the prescription that I get, segment 5 is the most potential one, because in terms of volume size, 145 prescriptions he is having, and he is writing 31% of SU, compared to maybe segment 3, 4, 2, and maybe 1, where they have other preferences as well. And if in my portfolio I don't have any other product and I have this, I will focus more of my resources on segment 3, because I know for them it is the topmost priority. So this quantification and value game and robust decision making ability comes through a quantitative research. So now we move on to the next step, where we have tried to, whatever we studied so far, or whatever we understood so far, tried to map it on startup developmental journey. And this is where you all will be able to possibly relate. We come from a pharma understanding, and our understanding of healthcare in our where we have applied research. We've tried to borrow those learnings and try to map it so that this construct helps you to determine what could be your developmental phases, what are the questions that you would emerge here, and how you would take it ahead. Over to you, Paramita.
Yeah, thanks, Rajita. There were some very interesting questions. I was just looking at the panel which were coming up. So how do you do attitude? What is a CAPI? So Kanchan, CAPI is a computer-assisted personal interview. Basically, these online responses which could be used for any of the platforms. Similarly, in erstwhile time, we also had TATI, which is telephonic. So when personal interview is not possible, it is telephony. So those are the terms and terminologies. So coming back, we had a meeting with the Sign team out here, and we could have a look at certain questions that all of you had asked while you registered for the webinar. So just to make it more relatable, we thought if we could map the questions along the phases, because we assume that this phase is very, very relevant, and you guys are familiar with it, because whenever all of you are in some phase or the other of this full journey. We are mostly in the establishing part, what we do in our day job, which also we will tell you. So we tried to map that what are the typical questions which you could think of answering at an ideation. Once the empathy phase is over, there's a defining phase is over. Now there is an ideation phase. So at ideation is basically questions we should be asking. Before that, it's observing, it's non-judgmental, and have. The moment you question, before ideation, you limit the thought process. So that's not the idea. So all the questions, we thought we could map it up, and let's see how we've done that. Rajita, next thing. Okay. So what we try to do here is, basically map some of the questions which we have got as per the phases. So for instance, at an ideation level, once the idea is there, the idea will say that, how can there was a question, identify the gap in the marketing specific to medical device. So here the idea is that if the idea has come, on the empathy, the idea has come, basically, is my idea workable or not? So I think one of the important questions at that phase is to ask that, is there a gap at all? First question. And how my product or my offering is going to fill up this gap. So probably this could be the questions we could talk about. Hence, that could take us on the journey of enabling solutions. Like we said, how to even understand the market, where you progress. And like Rajita mentioned, TAM, SAM, and SOM, the way we look at it is we say it's an epi funnel is what we call it. So for something like this, for our setup, in our personal experience, we start with the population, pop data. If this is the population, if this is the incidence of a disease, let's say, there was a question around cancer products. So what is the incidence, if it's a breast cancer, what is the prevalence, typically what is the age group? So we slowly know, bring in, and what is the first line of therapy? Is my idea will suit the first line, or will it be an add-on or a second line? Slowly you bring down that funnel. So you understand that what is the population that I can address, which is the SOM part, I think, whoever the question is, which is my obtainable population. So this is how we know. For this, we rely a lot on, we even do it, on WHO websites. We look at the different associations. We look into PubMed, and then we try to triangulate on many studies. Being a part of the big organization, we do have the privilege of having full subscription of most of the medical journals. And there is the medical people who do it for us. But as a startup, you have to be this superstar guys. You have to do it all on your own. So these are the possible approaches which we can move it.
Also, one point, Paramita, I would like to add here. Sorry to interrupt in between.
No,
so when
sure,
we were yesterday looking at the questions, there was this question of how do I understand my market, TAM. So these seem to be a very quantitative data. How big is my market size and all. However, we debated and we concluded that you may not actually need the number or the size at this point. But what are the attributes? What all should I look? So if I have a diagnosis, if I have a solution which is going to help me fill a need gap in the diagnostic space, then the understanding of that market, what is the market, what are the treatment choices, what are diagnostic measures are used currently, which therapy uses these, what is the patient flow in this therapy? Does it go from a generalist to specialist, or how do you encounter? These are all now qualitative insights. You may not need numbers here, but you need that information even at an ideation stage to feel that, otherwise you don't want to go ahead and then look back and feel, I went on my gut feeling and I missed checking that. That is where we are saying that the process of thinking is something that this framework will give you. You start here. That's why we have said you start that understanding of qualitative actions, make your own notes. So by the time maybe when you reach your commitment stage or scale up stage, or when you have to really go ahead, by that time you are sure as an owner of this entire project, you are not only dependent on anybody, you yourself are well equipped, and then you can quantify the numbers. Then you can even come to know where are the secondary researches available, because you have started your learning or inciting process much ahead in the journey.
If I may add here, Rajita and Paramita, let me give a very recent example that we had experienced. One of our startups had experienced. They were developing a platform technology, a device, a point of care device to estimate trisomy, fetal abnormality. And they thought that they had the best solution, because in tier 2, in the hinterland, these tests were expensive and most of the doctors were not even recommending. But when they went around and started interviewing customers, most of the customers said that this single test is not enough. You need to capture even autism. So you need to estimate another parameter called PAP-A, pregnancy-associated plasmaprotein A. So then they had to totally change their plans. So they had to accommodate another test in their device. Then the market itself changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? The market itself changed. Definition of the market has undergone a change.
Correct.
The market size expanded. There could be opposite situation where you may have to reduce the market size, or you may have to start with a smaller segment and then move across. And as a golden rule for startups, always start small. Niche marketing is the one that works best for startups. You do not have long pockets. Your investors will not give you that kind of money. So it is better that you enter a niche segment, dominate that segment, and then expand. And when you are doing a proper market segmentation, you will find that your product meets the requirements of a limited number of customers. That limited number could be sizable, but not to the entire market. It meets the needs of limited number of customers.
When that is the case, then you are practicing niche marketing, and it is the best way to go about, marketing your product. You can't be everything to everybody at the beginning. It is next to impossible. And that is where, when we touch upon marketing aspect, then we call it as product positioning and stuff like that. Right. So what I would say is that at the time of developing a product, visit as many customers as is possible. And the biggest mistake startups do is that their universe, supposing they are based out of Mumbai, their world begins and ends with Mumbai. Mumbai customers are not the all India customer representations, right? You need to reach out to other places also. Customers in Kolkata behave differently. Customers in Chennai behave differently. Customers in Delhi behave differently. You are doing a qualitative survey. You need to capture those profiles also.
And sorry, Partha, once you complete, I will chip in here.
No, you carry on.
Yeah. So the point Partha sir is trying to tell you is, now I'm constantly thinking of how a startup could do it, because if I am Mumbai based and I don't have any understanding of Chennai, Kolkata, but I need, but like for example, and this is just my recent thinking, you are working along with Sign, and there is a startup who's working in Delhi, and there's another startup which is working on some other concept. All I have to do, because you are entrepreneurial, you are a curious mind, that's how you have landed up in this journey. What you have to do is, if you do it in Mumbai, you go speak to as many customers, stakeholders possible, frame up your questions. You know what are the variations coming up. Just why, just frame up these questions. What you could do is, you could have a cross-functional group of team where you say, okay, this is our general small 5-6 people network, and find out. If I have done, I tell him, okay, in Chennai, if you are able to find out 1, 2, 3, just administer this, record the interview and send it to me. I will manage the rest. And I do a trade-off. You want to do something for your project, I render my resources in Mumbai. You send me one questionnaire for your project, I do it in Mumbai. It is very cost effective. There is no cost involved. It's more networking based, and that initial information is also better rather than only sticking to Mumbai. It may not be robust, because you are not wanting any robust information here, but any variation coming out is done very easily. Today we have all mobile phones. Ask them to just pre-take consent, record the entire interview conversation and email that clip. That's it. You can hear you can find out the variation. Okay, moving on, Paramita, to maybe.
Yeah, so I think, to sum it all up, very important to identify that gap which you can fill and try not to be all over the place. That brings us to the second phase, which is concepting. Here again, for whenever we are doing concept testing, it can be just based on any kind of stimulus. Basically, we usually use all the sampling guidelines which Rajita talked about, and this is usually at the concept testing, it is usually qual. So qual, even today, you have far more agile tools, which is their SurveyMonkey or even online panels, that they work a lot in trying to understand how good or bad the concept is. Or for instance, you reach out. So the moment the questioning thinking process is there, the list of questions are there, the objective is clear, even you alone can go. For instance, if it is something to do with a geriatric, one can always go to an old age home and create do some kind of an FGD among those respondents that you would want, and use the technological platform basically to understand the concepts on of these markets. And this will also help us in identifying the customer segment based on the ATU studies which we can do. Next is at the level of a startup, when there is a commitment, that is where we have to understand the potential of the market. That's where I think the numbers come. So before that, when we talk about the addressable population, it's not numbers. It is where is it lying? It's more about the journey and the flow. Right at the commitment level, we need to have some sense of the potential of the market that where we are operating in terms of could be patient population, it means of the availability of the treatment, if in terms of access that is there. So all these small informations are more relevant at this phase. Secondly, also what we hear also some of the questions which we received, that should private firms be hired for market research? At this phase, probably for a startup, it will be expensive. For an established organization, probably it is the way to go. We don't think of doing a concept testing beyond a concept testing on our own. We definitely reach out to farms, but for starters, probably you need to do it on your own at this point in time, or through use the agile tools which is available, which is mostly online based, tech based, which will give you maximum traffic. Social media can be a very, very interesting at this phase, to able, rather than hiring a market research, can I do a social listening? I think that could be very important. But when you come to validation, that is where I think you should be able to keep a little bit of resources there and run basically to validate the concept which you have seen. So you have a concept from a qual output and you've looked at the potentials, and that's where you validate it with more research at that point in time. And definitely when you scale up, when you do pricing, price estimation, that's the time. It augurs well if you go out. The reason is that's very critical to get the right pricing. So between validation and scaling, one could go up, maybe at prototype testing, after prototype testing, and again go back 2 steps and continue this whole research journey. And for growth phase, I'll come on the next slide. It's purely from what we do, on Envine. And I'll give you a little bit of flavor because I also handle the whole the R&D pipeline business cases. So typically, just to give you, whether it is our company, any big company, when they start at an ideation, actually they think of many ideas. So from a healthcare angle, they look at, can I have a product which can help, which can work for, say, ADPKD, for a kidney disease? Can it also work for Parkinson's disease? Can it also work for this? So one candidate, can it satisfy this is the at an ideation level. So slowly, when that research, so at one, you drop 1 or 2, you move to the phase 2. By phase 2B, you kind of really understand that, okay, maybe this candidate may go, go ahead in its journey. So that is the time we start doing first time mapping. Now, from an organizational point, that's the time when we look at all the medical, the global team basically looks at all the researches which is available, what are the problem areas, the disease profile, and they look at then a market estimation for all these markets come. So should it be for Parkinson's first? Should it be for multiple sclerosis first? I'm just giving an assumption. Or it could be for 2 other diseases, could be for epilepsy first, or is it for some other disease? So then you size the market of these 4 and you figure out that, okay, out of these 4, and for this sizing, we don't do quantitative. This is purely epidemiology data, medical based data that is done at this point in time. And so from there, you decide, because it's cost, right? You cannot allow for 4 candidates to get into 4 clinical trial phases. It's a bomb. So therefore, you start narrowing down the filter. So it is only 1 or 2 which goes into the next phase of the research and the clinical trial. So once these things happen at phase 3, the approvals happen, and at phase 4 is when we get into what we call as the pre-launch for a drug, typically in our kind of a parlance. So basically, here we do the detailed market size estimation across countries, looking at the population level, looking at the standard of care, looking at the payer system of the country. So with looking into all these things, the whole of, for a typical drug candidate, this is how the entire pre-launch product is, the research design is all planned. So then we come to before launching again, this is where you do, after the market segmentation, you do the product positioning based on the backed by the medical and the clinical trial data that is all available. Then the whole product positioning happens, and then the concept test, everything happen. And for a bigger organization, right at this phase is where we do the product pricing. So these are the studies which is typically done. So before launch to the market, that is where we talk about, based on the concept, we take it into the message testing, logo testing, brand logo, all kind of communication testing. How believable it is. Is my doctor believing, reasons to believe, as we call it as an RTB study. So these are typically qual studies followed by quant if you have deep pocket. If not, we do small quant study depending upon the messaging. And then we start doing the tracking. So basically, we understand the whole, the awareness, the trial, usage. Then there is something called the tracking studies, which is the baseline. Just before the product is out into the market, that is the time when we fix the baseline. And this baseline, this track is repeated after a decided period of time. Maybe for the first 2 years after the product is launched, we do 2 waves, to see is there a belief shift is happening, is the awareness of my brand is increasing among my doctors, what kind of messaging is not working for him, what is he remembering of me, what is in his mind, my positioning versus my competitor's positioning, have I been able to tell my message well? So that's what typically a tracking study continues to be there. And then after 2 years, 3 years, it probably usually is once a year. And then more and more elements are built in. If there are activities around the brand, if there are, say, symposia around the brand, if there has been an objective of a message change, if that has been incorporated. So this is the whole way the whole tracking studies happen. But again, as the product matures, again, we start about newer. So now, if suppose we looked into priority segment 1, so we found out that this is where let's put in all our money, let's capture the market here, like Partha was saying, own that segment. What next? So I might have 80% market share in that segment that I have first got into. Now is the time to go to my next segment. So
Paramita, here I would like to add a couple of things.
Yeah.
When you are, you did a market scan and you came across 4 segments of the market.
Yeah.
Now, you can't be operating in all the 4 segments. You need to rank them. On what basis will you rank them? That is very, very important. So there are 3 parameters which you can use to rank a segment: the potential of the segment, the cost of acquisition, and what is the third one?
Ability to win.
Ability to win. Yeah, ability to win. So there are 3 parameters on my ability to win: the cost of acquiring a customer, and the total position and the total potential of this segment. These 3 things determine which segment I will choose. See, there could be a case where the potential is high, but my ability to win and the cost of acquisition, they are way too high. Then, though the potential is more, I should not be selecting or participating in this segment. The potential of a segment may be medium, but my ability to win is high and the cost of acquisition is also high, in the sense that I have a better chance of acquiring a customer. Then, though the potential is limited, then I should be, because of my ability to win is better and the cost of acquisition is at a lower cost, then I should be approaching that segment first. So this is the way you decide in which segment you need to participate. It is not, out of whim and fancy, I choose a segment. First, there should be a product fit, product market fit. That particular, your product should meet most of the requirements of the users in that particular segment. If, say, there are 10 requirements of the users and your product is able to satisfy 8 requirements, in all probability, you are going to win in that segment. If I have only 2 and 3, if I'm able to satisfy only 2 or 3 requirements and most of them are bells and whistles, then my product is not going to succeed in this segment. I need to vacate that segment and look at other segments. So this is very, very critical for all startups. And this is where most of the mistakes are made. And this is where investors have a lot of reservations. When you present that I will, say for example, I am in the business of doing genome sequencing for tuberculosis. I can't be taking it to using it as a diagnostic tool or a screening tool. Definitely not. The major problem, if I analyze the market, is in multiple drug-resistant tuberculosis and extensive drug-resistant tuberculosis. Right? Though the segment numbers may be small, maybe only 1 lakh patients in a year, but my solution has the best fit for those people. So I
ability to
need
win
to
is
go and
higher.
pitch. I need to go and pitch to government authorities that look here, my sequencing helps in identifying people who are going to, who have multiple drug resistance or extensive drug resistance. I give resistance patterns for almost 17 anti-TB drugs. So that is what is going to carry the day. If you say that I'm going to use it as a screening tool because the burden of TB is huge, you're going to fail miserably because your pricing is such that it will be too expensive for it to be used as a screening tool. So these are some of the things that you need to keep in mind, and these are some of the things the investors look forward to, and hence the need for market research.
And this, what all we've just said, I mean, just before the launch, and the entire thing comes as a
Always
part of marketing research and is a very big enabler in making robust marketing decisions, because market is what you do to the customer. And if you don't position it well, then you might it might be a need gap, but it is very difficult to figure out which customer you should appeal to. So like how pharma does, even big FMCGs have deep pockets to be able to test this. And simple, very understandable example for us when Paramita was trying to say that if I'm an 80%, for example, Cadbury is an 80% market share in the chocolate market, then my next role is to expand the category. That time they repositioned the chocolate to beat the mithai market, saying kuch mitha ho jaye. So automatically the consumer started visualizing, yeah, for a Diwali I can buy a chocolate, I didn't need to buy a mithai. So this is a fallout of all these research driven decisions which help you expand the market and co-create. I mean, at various life cycles of a product, there are different requirements, and that's how you keep building your brand. And like Partha said, if you have built a brand at a particular level, through a niche you reached a level, but now your brand is known. And if you can take any big brands, Nike, even in a pharma brand, like Partha handled Cardace as a brand, and we went into multiple line extensions of Cardace in the same space, but positioning to specific segments, so that overall the brand and its franchise started growing because it started connecting to its consumers.
So I think thanks a lot. So one last thing I wanted to tell in the earlier one is that as you move, you are not the only one who's operating in that market. You have
Yes.
competition. We should never lose sight of it. Is anybody coming up from what are they doing? Because sometimes by competitive pressure, you might need to reduce the price. So if you reduce the price, your sales fall. So again, you have a type of market research which will try to tell you, see, if you reduce the price by 10%, you can have a volume loss for the first 1 or 2 years, but you can kind of gain up. So at every stage of the life cycle, from an idea to the product to its maturity, there are specific researches and there are identified methodologies. It's important to know what to do when to remain very prudent and to be very, very optimized. Thanks, Aditya. So just move into the next slide. So basically, we just thought, that now what we talked about is, of course, with big MNCs, with big deep pockets, we don't blink an eye if we have to do a 20 lakhs of research even for my country. But that's not the true for startups. So we just thought this was how can you integrate market research in your own startup journey. We again start off with ideation, start getting a feel of the market. You remember what we said? No numbering here. It is feel. Simple disk research you can understand. Go to websites. Go to, especially since this is a healthcare predominant audience, go to these market research websites also, MRSI, Ipsos, the healthcare guys. Many of them have white papers, which are free syndicated reports. If you want to understand about cancer, go to OncoMonitor website. It will give you some feel. It might not be accurate, but it's good enough for you. So do that research. No point in wasting money there. To understand the target customers, you need to go through, like we understood all through the quali part, go for exploratory observation. And in nowadays, it is a criminal not to utilize SurveyMonkey and Google Forms. I'm sure my 14-year-old son also uses Google Forms. So I'm sure you guys are doing that. I would like to know how much of SurveyMonkey you use. I think this is the way market research is also evolving. That's all a part of agile research. Is because things are very online. Gone are the days. So when we do a brick and mortar research, even today's time, we need 12 weeks. COVID has taught us that anything can happen in 12 weeks. So you don't have 12 weeks. Your problem statement would change. So how do I do it fast and how do I do it continuous? So these are the ways to do that. You can do questionnaires and surveys on that. I don't know about for individual, I think you can get about 900 rupees a month. That kind of a sponsorship is there. What we do at Sanofi, like I have one login, which is a company wide login. So it's like I pay 20,000 rupees for that and I can do n number of stuff. So whether it is medical, marketing, training, everybody uses my login. I log in and they do the surveys. Maybe you could think of co-partnering among some of you or figure it out so that you do one-time login and people can, it can be leveraged over a period of time. Today, even positioning also happens on SurveyMonkey. If you have a very initial concept, don't go to a physical call where you have to pay cost per interview. SurveyMonkey is an easier, more jugadu way of doing things. So that needs to be explored very well. Second, third thing, if you want to see how your product will be used, that is where you need to do the face-to-face interviews and also focus group. Focus group are absolutely probably best, equipped if you want a consensus. Wherever you want to drive a consensus, focus groups are good. Flip side is that if there is a very strong influencer, he can influence the whole group. You might not get the right insight because, all these researches ultimately lead to insight and only information is not insight. What can be actionable to your next step of your startup plan? This can help. Go to focus group. Look out what your customers are looking for. Social media is very key. I just give you a very recent example. What happened during COVID is that doctors were not doing any transplant. So we wanted to understand what's happening in the market. And if I have a solution for a transplant, doctors are not available, patients are not coming. So it's like a choice. Do I lose the patient to the kidney failure or a liver failure? Or do I lose the patient because his immunity will be compromised and he can get into COVID? So it's a very, very difficult choices to be made. So we did a social media listening. So we figured out that what people are talking about, they are worried about journeys, dialysis, transplant. So we figured out what's the conversation. That helped our marketing team to design the conversation that concerns with COVID-related immunity for a transplant patient. So with that information, you go and equip your HCP. So these are the way we draw out insights. Google Analytics and Facebook Audience Insights, I have not personally used them, but I understand they are free and they can be very, very resourceful and could help you in your own journey. Third thing is we came to say that how do I know who is going to be my customer? Qual study, concept testing, how my product will get positioning. So these are the places where you can do the qual studies. Third thing is you can do a prototype and then of course piloting. FGDs again are a good way to do that. Last is the SurveyMonkey again can be used for testing your prototype. Just a caution, looking at how closely you are guarding your concept, doing a prototype testing in an open FGD can make you vulnerable for your competition. So keep a watch, do that due diligence at your own before decide which tool to use for your prototype testing and piloting. You fail, go back again to the rest. That's the agile research. And I guess most of the things we fail in prototyping and scaling up. Last part is, demand and pricing. Now, this is our recommendation that for this, it's better not to try on our own because this needs to be backed by evidence. Most of the agencies who do pricing study, they have their own proprietary simulators where they simulate. Sometimes it is good to have this kind of a backup when you go and meet your investors. And we just saw how we can do the positioning, messaging, and logo testing. These can also be done completely online. And especially in today's time where you have online consumer.
Here I would like to address the audience here.
Yeah.
Most of you commit blunders in terms of pricing.
Yeah.
And when I asked what is your price and how did you arrive at it, you only quote BOM. Bills of material is not cost of goods. Bills of material doesn't include labor costs, distribution costs, and other costs.
Your cost.
BOM is not COGS. Please understand that. On COGS, there are other costs also that are added.
Absolutely.
Right? And that is how you arrive at pricing. You don't, BOM, in BOM, you do not take inventory into consideration. Whereas in COGS, you take inventory costs into consideration. You take insurance into consideration. So please, for heaven's sake, do market research at least for pricing.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, there is a false notion among startups that if you price it low, because you are a startup, unless you price it low, you are not going to get customers. Right? I can tell you from my experience that you lower the price only if you can open up the market. Supposing for 3 lakhs rupees, if there are only 100 devices that are being sold, and if you are going to market it at 1 lakh rupee, then you should be selling at least 4 to 5,000 devices. Only then it makes sense to sell or price it at 1 lakh rupees. If you are going to move from 100 to 200 and thinking that you have doubled the market is foolishness. Lower the price only if you can open up the market, bring in new users to the segment. Otherwise, please deliver value. And if you deliver value, even if you are a startup, you can command premium pricing. All my life, I have sold only premium products. All my life. And that too 10 to 20 times the cheapest generic that was available in the market. Before I retired, I was working on a product which used to cost 40,000 rupees a month, whereas my nearest competitor was operating at 300 rupees a month. And I had drawn up plans to market this product, which used to cost the patient 40,000 rupees a month.
So I think that
I'm sure that Paramita and her team would have continued my work, and the product must be ready for launch, right?
Yes, we are working on it at 40,000. My only thing is that since you mentioned this, I work a lot in M&A. So the self-talk we need to have is not price, it is value. Yeah. What is the value I am creating? Then, price is an element to it also. I think once you talk about value, it will be easy for you also to comprehend and to see your own product as a value rather than from a price-led, only a price.
Yeah, the simplest way to define value is perceived benefit minus price is value.
Yes, absolutely.
Perceived benefit minus price is value.
Wearing a Nike versus a other brand, a lower rank brand, the perceived value of wearing a Nike is very different. Actually, it's doing the same utility. But the features that you are convincing and you are building those features onto the product, which appeals to the sports athlete for whom they are very, very relevant. They may not be relevant to us. We might think why this is so expensive in general for a arm public, but they never develop a prototype for an arm public. They develop their concepts only for specific segments. And then they make the brand an aspirational brand where eventually the arm public want to feel I should at least have one of it.
So okay.
Yeah, so, I think we are running short of time.
That's No, I just want to take 5 minutes. This I must tell you this very quickly. I'll take you at what happened in the last 1 year, how the whole research paradigm changed. It is the time for agile researchers. This is what I would like to tell you. So you don't have 4 months, like you said, you have 5 questions. You need an answer of only those 5 questions to go to the next step. Don't do a full length research study. You go to a guy where you have online panels, and today with healthcare tech ups being online, you have companies, I'll name them. There is Librate, there is DocFlexus, there is M3 India. So they have doctors, all specialties of doctors on their panel. So all you need to go is ask them to run these questions. You could have a yearly contract that for 1 year, you'll ask 80 questions on a monthly basis. So then it is a little less, you don't have to go through the moderator charge, you don't have to go through, it's a little less economical, more faster, and it helps you to course correct, which is, I think, a need of the hour for where you are. So that is what we need to do for agile research. It's very important to have the ready panel of respondents, whether it's doctors, consumers, whoever is your target audience is. It can be even through social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can run surveys there. And also, if there's something like this, if a webinar is happening, there are health startups who do these. Those questions also can be planted. A quick poll then and there can give you, this is called the quick feedbacking on content and everything. So this will also give us a quick one. They are directional. They could give you strong lead indicator without breaking the bank or without burning the pocket. So, this is what I wanted to tell, that please do. There is a lot of DIY. And let me tell you, even Sanofi is doing that. Worldwide, they are having a pact with a DIY company. Do your own market research. Do it fast. Do it quickly. Do it on a monthly basis. You can do it with 5 questions. You can do it with 20 questions. You can also do qualitative on some of the online portals. So these are definitely far more economical for you all to do that, because I guess that's what you need to do, because they are faster, they are smarter, and they are tailored to your own needs, and you can do it anytime, anywhere. You can have responded from, wherever, whichever geographies that you can. Technology is no barrier in this case. So I just wanted to tell that I think this is the go-to for all of us. So these are the typical surveys which you should see online researches. And I think one last point on the pricing part.
I think pricing we've done enough.
Yeah, I think we have done that.
Pricing.
Yeah.
On to the last one.
Yeah. These are the agencies. Some of the agencies who do that. The big guys are Ipsos, Nielsen, GfK, Hansa, M3 India. But we would maybe provide you with the lower one. We may not know the right startup, who can do researches for you. But I think it would be great to network. And even all those new guys did start as startups. So try to co-create, co-partnering probably could help you leverage to do the market researches with them. Coming to the...
Paromita, I have to ask you to just wind
yeah.
So that we can take some live questions.
Yeah. I think we are done.
We are done.
Okay, we thank you a lot for the insights that have come from all 3 of you. I think our audience has benefited a lot. If you would like to ask our panelists a question live, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. Especially if you're a startup who has some question regarding market research, we encourage you to please raise your hand and ask our panelists the question live. So while we wait for somebody to raise their hand, I'll just go through some of the questions that were posted on the chat box. And I think, Paromita, you've already looked at some of them and you wanted to reply to some of them live too. So I'll just, so yes, if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and ask. Is there some? Okay, so I'll just ask one of the questions that I see on the chat box. Who's can you unmute them? Okay, so if you have been unmuted, please ask your question.
Hello.
Yes, Gyana,
am I audible?
Mr. Gyana Krishnan. Yes, you are. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I'm Professor Gyana Eli Krishnan. I have 2 questions. One is, what are the research methods and validation suggested for medical device segmentation? Because now we are coming out with incorporating some of the latest technologies like the artificial intelligence, machine learning, cyber security, and blockchain and things like that, which are different from the current technology being used in the industry. So as you mentioned that I got a little insight from Paromita that we could use the focus group. But apart from the focus group, how do you suggest?
Or you would like to, yeah.
No, you will take I don't.
So, sir, so if you are operating in particular therapy area and the diagnostics is revolving more around that therapy area, what I would suggest is we can even have a one-on-one conversation with some of the lead KOLs of that area. What diagnostics are done currently? what's the competitor framework, introduce little bit of a concept and elicit response from them. What do you think of this solution? This could be one. Another stakeholder could be actually the diagnostic center,
Right.
because most of the times the KOL is aware that this can be done, he prescribed, but actually on ground the diagnostic centers know a very deep understanding of what attributes are needed, and they also could be a target audience for you to interview and get this understanding. Focus group is calling them in a particular environment and getting those insights. But in agile, looking at agile methods, if you have well networked, if you've spoken to them one on one, you could always send a Zoom invite, call them and get their insights together, so that in one sitting you can get a consensus around it and you're very confident about taking the insights ahead. In one on one, what happens is I give you my perspective, somebody else give you his perspective. At the end, they don't hear each other and elicit more responses, and you do not know the consensus. So then you have to again go back to a group saying this is what is coming out. That would be my take, Paramita.
Yeah, no, I'll just give a little example, although not exactly similar, a simpler medical device, we have, with some of our insulins, we have pens. So before we launched the new pens, what we did it very recently. We selected 2-3 centers and we got some competitors, the nearest competitor who is, it could be very similar, it may not be similar. So in this case, it was kind of similar. So we got all the pens and we also got one of our dummy pens, basically to see. And then they actually held this because it could be held in the hands. And, they saw that if one is making easy to click, the other one is more difficult to click. Okay, then there was a lady who said that, I have to put on my specs to read. They should increase the size of the font where I can see what is the measure of the of the the IU is written, whether it is 16, 20, am I able to read it, where or not. So sometimes if you have a stimulus, you can use it. If you don't have, you could even think of making a dummy stimulus and probably run it past, even on Zoom we can do that. We did it last year, but for us it was simpler. We did communication testings and all like this. We got respondents on the Zoom call, and the agency used the CLMs, what we are going to say, as a stimulus. And then we asked them to poll. So we kind of got some of the ideas on a quant basis and some open questions, what could be for the, what could be the improvement areas. So I think we can do that, creating dummy stimulus in an FGD environment, physical. If not physical, we can do it on a virtual. But in such a case where you want a touch and feel, probably a good FGD with some of the key doctors, could be a way to go ahead with them.
Okay, we'll move to the next question from Kanchan Dwivedi. If you can please ask your question.
Hi, thanks for the insightful session, Sain, as well as all both the guests, Rajita and Paramita. So my question was that if you have to ask questions around attitude, how do you exactly go around checking the attitude of the person? Where do you get these questions? And also on the number of questions that you should have, is there a limitation?
Sorry, Kanchan, we cannot hear you anymore. You kind of trailed off towards the end. So
okay, yeah. So 2 questions I had. One question was around the attitudinal methods to check the attitude of the person. So how do you even find out about the attitude of the person through the questions? And the second one was around how many questions should you have in your survey? Is there an ideal number?
So in terms of attitudes, generally, if you ask questions around what kind of activities they are engaged in daily lifestyle or in that space, what are their interests, what drives them, what are their opinions on certain things, what is their underlying value, these are the areas which determine a person's attitude. So for example, when we look at our own therapy area, if I'm operating in diabetes as a space, then there are various treatment options, and we saw a segmentation where somebody was preferring one over the other. So why does he prefer that? Is his patient profile of lower economic group, or he's more convinced because he has when he studied medicine, that was the lead category, and after that he's been practicing and he's got clinical experience in that, and he's not a very innovator, or he's not the one who would try newer ones, so he's resistant for newer one. Or there could be somebody who's, no matter whatever new comes in the market, I would like to try it. So
Right.
that is where how your attitude comes. In terms of number of questions, I think when you design a questionnaire, what all you want to know, I think about 7, 8 should be enough, because what happens is too much. So again, it depends on what you want to know. If you determine if the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if I will get a good hang of it, then your questions could revolve around those. So determining how I will gauge a person's attitude would be done through qualitative research. And if you understood from a qualitative research that the variation is around these 5 to 7, 10 parameters, इससे ज़्यादा अलग कुछ नहीं आ रहा है. Even if I talk to 10 people, then questions revolving around that quantity is more than sufficient to get your answers.
Right.
Related to this, Rajita, I have a question from the chat box where there are two questions. One is there any resources available online where you can get a series of these questions, because many people might not know how to phrase their questions. That's question number one. The second is how to remove bias. So when you're doing a user or a potential customer survey, how do you remove bias from your question?
So I'm sure, if I haven't recently done, but we can look at example questionnaires, and you would have some definitely on to the general thing, which is the right one to ask, and you all have to do a little bit of study to ask, which is like, for example, even when you use a Google survey or a Survey Monkey, then if I want a ranking question, then how should I frame the question that I get ranked? Whereas if I need to get attitudes, generally attitudes are not black and white. So how I would do is I would give a statement that I like to watch Netflix over TV. How much do you agree over general TV channels? How much would you agree? Rate on a scale of 0 to 10. So if I'm a binge watcher of Netflix, I will say 10. But if somebody who's watching Ekta Kapoor shows, will say 2. So that tells you that what is the profile of that customer or that attitude. So generally it's a statement and you take a rating. So then how many statements you will ask them to depends upon time, cost, benefit, because you don't want to shoo the respondent away. You also want to keep him engaged and continue the survey till the end. And second one was on
bias.
Sampling bias. So
Yeah.
sampling bias is, again, when you do through a third party, the agency also designs it well that your bias doesn't come in. Like if I want a pan-India understanding of, and I have a plan of launching pan-India, then I cannot launch something study only Mumbai target and launch it all India, because a South behaves very differently than an East behaves very differently than a North. Mumbai is a very different city in terms of cultural connotations and interpretations. Delhi is a very different connotation. So you have to take those cultural factors. And if I were to design that sample, I would take, say, almost an equal mix of 4 zones, almost similar of male, female, if my product is for both. Then if I have to take 400, I will see to it that I have at least 30 in each cross-sanctional thing. Means there should be a metro female 30 segment, there should be a non-metro female 30 segment. At the same time, that 30 should be representation of 8 or 4 zones, and that is how I will create a sampling grid. When I am then recruiting the respondents for survey, I have a screener questionnaire where I ask her, you're from metro, tick mark, tick mark, tick mark. And I know, okay, I found one appropriate fit in this segment. That once I have reached my optimal number of that segment, I don't hunt for any respondents there. I then compensate for the other segment, so that overall, when I launch a 400 respondent survey, I know there is a good backup to avoid any kind of balance, and the output that comes is much more robust.
And in case you don't need cuts, like Rajita said, then I think 8 to 10 is a good enough. But if you need multiple cuts, 30 is a good enough for you to have all sorts of permutation combinations, just to add to that. And
again,
for any
going back to 30, at 30, the error of
margin is more or less acceptable, yeah, at 95% confidence. So
okay, so we have a question from Lucky Bhave. Please, can you ask your question? And I request everybody to be kind of brief because we are reaching the end of the session.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We are developing a patient engagement platform so that they are responsible for their own health and they can maintain a healthy lifestyle. So recently we have also conducted a survey which involved 50 participants, and the results appear to be skewed. The objective of the questionnaire was to understand the lifestyle patterns and how much the participants are engaging in self-care and to take care of themselves, of their health. So my question is, how do we understand if the participants are able to stick to exercise routine or to a healthy lifestyle? Because in our survey, most of them actually answered that we want to, we stick to a exercise routine, but in reality, most of them actually do not. So we all know that it's a fact. So how do we try to get that insights from the survey?
Before Rajita and Paromita start answering, let me give this questionnaire, the questionnaire, an example. People, if you ask what are the qualities of a good scientist, you will take it out of the textbook and narrate all those things. If I ask how good are you a scientist, then you will say, yes, I am a very good scientist. But in reality, none of them may be right. So what we usually do is we go by behavior. And how do we pick up behavior? There is something called being fly on the wall. We do immersion interviews. And immersion interviews can tell the researcher what is it, what is the stated behavior and what is the demonstrated behavior. Right. So that's how we are able to pick up the nuances. Right. You always watch for action. And there is a grid, there is a thing. Attitude determines your belief, belief determines your behavior. Yeah. So that is how you pick up all these inconsistencies. Right. And
probably also lucky to answer you here, probably a call is the right way to do this study if you really want to understand. So we just learned, right? When do we do what? So if you really want to understand the actual attitudes, probably you need to do a call before probably figuring out, more pointed questions that you might want to ask in your survey. So sometimes this is also, important for you to get to remove the biases and get probe and get the right responses.
Yeah, there is something on CAPI which is repeatedly coming out.
Yeah, I am answering. CAPI is not, CAPI is simply administered through computer aided. So earlier in old times, there used to be a paper pen questionnaire. Researchers used to go ask the question, note down, get the paper pen collection back. Then everybody used to enter the information, then analyze it. From the time computer has come, they go with an iPad. The questionnaire is hosted on to the iPad. They ask questions, report. What time it saves is the entire data entry, error and all that is very easily saved. And you immediately, the minute the interviews are over, the data is ready for analyzable format. You don't have to
so our Google form is a classic CAPI. Even a survey monkey where you click on is a CAPI.
It's a classic CAPI.
I showed one slide. You completely get what is the percentage respondent, what did they say, how many of, like you do a lot for satisfaction surveys, it's good, bad, ugly, how many percentages of all people say that it was beautiful. So, it comes in a backend analytics.
Okay, so we will take two more questions, one live and one out of the chat box. I'll just quickly read this question aloud from the chat box. We are working on a diagnostic project, just completed a pilot study with 10 cases. What is the ideal sample size you recommend?
Yeah, before the panelists come in, before Rajita and Paramita come in, let me put it this way. Are you looking at these 10
Who's the
cases.
stakeholder, Partha?
Who are the stakeholders?
I
Yeah.
would ask, before coming to the number, who are the stakeholders who are going to get impacted?
One, the stakeholder would be the lab. The second stakeholder could be the patient. The third stakeholder would be the doctor who is recommending the test. So 10 of each. 10 of each should be good enough.
Good enough.
That 10 should not be from the place where you are based out of.
Yeah.
It should be pan-India and random. I mean, in sampling, no, there should not be biased sampling.
Bias.
Okay.
Right? It should be, it should be in such a fashion.
One of the pitfall when you do a self research is be very, very critical of the bias, because it's your own product you have developed, you are very attached to it. Most of the time you want to see the good side of it, and you could fall in the sampling bias pitfall, because you should go with an unbiased opinion. It should be very, very fact based. If somebody is telling you this is not working, you should not get emotional about the product saying, I know it is working, that product person did not understand, because that means you are interpreting and concluding for that observer and you are missing out on the insight. If the person is telling you something, there is an insight lying there. That means it is not either resonating or it is not the need. That's something that you should draw back in your understanding. So very, very important to be careful of your own bias when you are administering a survey.
Okay, now one last question from Gaurav, and after which we will kind of wrap up the session. Questions that went unanswered, we will get back to you with the answers. And with the permission of the panelists, for those of you who want to get in touch with them, please get in touch with us and we will share their contact details.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what are the take-home messages? Before we conclude, I think a few words from my side would be in order. Now, I'm sure that these two ladies have established the need and utility of market research, number one. Why should we do that? That has been clearly established. The ways to go about doing market research has also been explained in good detail. The critical, how important it is to do pricing research has also been established, right? At what stage you should do what type of market research, that has also been dealt with, right? So most of the doubts which you people have, by and large, they have been covered. In case you still have more doubts, you can write to Sign. Please do not disturb either Rajita or Paramita, because they are, they are too busy professionals, right? Not that people in Sign are not busy, but it is our day job. Whereas for them, they'll have to take their time out and then answer. So whatever are your doubts, please address to Sign, and we will be reverting back to you with the right answers, right? And I thank all the participants for this excellent session. And with your help and cooperation, we hope to have many more such interesting sessions. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Partha,
thank
and
you
the
so
Sign
much.
team from our side.
Wait. Before you thank us, we have to thank you first. So I will want to thank, it was an extreme pleasure and a huge learning experience to have our three panelists today. Ms. Kamath and Ms. Bhattacharya, we absolutely appreciate the time that you gave Sign today, and to all our participants. We thank Partha, of course, for his very insightful comments when he interrupted y'all's presentation and gave his insights. And we thank him for moderating this session and driving the discussion. We thank all three of you. It was a privilege and a pleasure to host this webinar with your help. And thank you again for your time. Before we call this session to an end, I would just like to inform all our participants that we have some more interesting webinars coming up. At the end of March, we will be hosting Vijay Kumar Ivaturi, who will give us an insight on the role of AI/ML in the healthcare domain. And so we would like to invite you back. And so please go to the Sign website, go to the YouTube channel for if you want to revisit this session all over again. We'll have the video uploaded there. And Please follow us on our website and on our YouTube channel for many more such insightful sessions. I thank our moderator, Partha sir, and our two very eminent panelists who've taken time off to be with us today, Rajata and Paramita. We hope to again in the future have another insightful session with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to the attendees. Thanks to you all. We also went back to the basics for a while, because we had to come and speak to you all. Thank you, Partha, and thank you so much, Bratuti and Dr. Pranita. We look forward to connect with you, with any kind of help and a little good time over similar, really, really enriching discussions. Thank you.
So we'll end this meeting today. Thank you all, panelists and participants.
Bye.